Our new assignment is going to be creating a light sculpture. So I made a little list for you. A light sculpture is, well, all sculptures are three-dimensional. They're meant to be seen from many angles. So that means if I'm behind it or on the side of it, it should look interesting. It shouldn't just be like a one-sided thing. Shadows are important. Now, since we're working with light, we're going to be playing with light and shadow, mostly from where light is emitted from and where light is not emitted from. We need to make sure we're paying attention to both of those things. And finally, good craftsmanship is important. When people look at your sculpture, it needs to be sturdy. It needs to look clean. It can't have loose things sticking out everywhere, at least not for this assignment. It should look good. There shouldn't be any sloppiness to it. Nothing flapping off, no gobs of glue sticking out, or big chunks of wire hanging out. Our goal is to create an ambient light sculpture. Ambient means that it's not a direct light, like it's not a light you're going to be using to read or light up the room. It's just light to give a mood or feeling to a space. So it's not just dark in the room. Sometimes it's just light it's a pleasing little sculpture to look at, but it's not a light that we're using for utility purposes. It is calming and aesthetically pleasing. So that means, well, calming, it makes you feel calm and relaxed. So it's not going to be very bright or bold. And aesthetically pleasing means it's going to look nice to you. It's not going to look scary. It's not going to look rough. It's just going to look nice. It's going to look good. Now those are things that we all have to decide on our own, but those are choices that we're going to have to make for ourselves. But generally people do look at something and they say they can have an opinion as to whether it looks good or not good. And most people share those opinions for the most part. All right, so here's what we have. In your kit at home, you're going to have a piece of mirrored plastic, a wire with a plastic coating on it, a little light. Some of you might have a flashing light, some of you might just have a steady light, and some tissue paper that's shiny. You're also going to need a pencil, and it should be sharp so you can use it to pierce things, glue, a scissors, a Sharpie, and something to color with. I also want you to get a hold of a paper tube. It could be a toilet paper tube or a paper towel tube, but I'd like you to get a tube. Now, I'd really like you to all arrive at a different solution for this problem, but these are the materials you're going to be given. So it's up to you to decide how these things are going to get put together. So I'm going to turn my light off so I don't run my battery down. So there's a couple of ways you can attack this. One, you have these things, and you can start looking at them and examining them and trying to decide how it's going to work for you. So you might want to lay out your papers. One thing you might notice is when you overlap paper, you can see through it, but it changes the color a little bit. So if I put the white over the green, it's not as bright. It's also going to make it more opaque, which means it's not as see-through. You can take your little light and shine it behind things to see what it's going to look like. So it's very bright when it's just behind white. When it's behind these two, it's not as bright. It's a little bright again when it comes right behind the green. But see, the more paper you stack up, the more difficult it's going to be for the light to shine through. So now I'm hardly getting any light through. But when it's through one sheet, it's really bright. So you can play with layering that. You can just glue layers together or cut out shapes and put one shape on top of another shape. So that's the tissue paper. You have this tube. Now a tube can be cut in many ways. Now I think a paper towel tube is going to be too big. So flatten it out and cut it. This is more like a toilet paper size tube. So I have two openings right now. I could have my light down in here and it's shining up, but that's the only way light's going to get out. So I have a couple of choices. I can leave it like that, drop the light in there, put some paper over the ends, but it's not emitting too much light. So how am I going to get this tube to emit light? Well, you can flatten this tube out and start cutting designs into it to make it allow light to come through. So you just fold it and cut. Well, now light can come through right there. I can really go crazy on this. Watch what I do here. So now I've got all of these holes. I can push things back like this and forward, but I can also now move to the next part. I could fold it here, and I could really like snowflake this whole thing. And by that I mean like a paper snowflake. I can cut lots of shapes all the way around. I don't have to stick to my first fold. I can really start going crazy on this thing. So you might want to have a paper towel tube so you can play with that. So now look at what's happening here. I'm getting shapes coming right in, and I can do that again and again and again by just continually going around it and cutting in towards the next or the last cut. And then you just pop it back into place. Since I didn't make much of one there, I can make a big one there, so I have a little bit of a variety. And this is just one thing you can work with. You don't even have to use the tube if you don't want to. Let's see, look at now. I've got this structure that is going to let a lot of light through. Now, I could cover it with that, or any of the colors. Now I put my light inside. I don't know if you can. Now it's letting that light come shining through all those spaces. Now, here's another thing. This reflective material is going to reflect the light, and if I curve it, the light's going to bounce off of all the sides. If I crease it, it's going to be like a little mirrored room and reflect light more and more. So if I make a kind of like a little box, so I folded it, I'm going to fold it, now if I put my light in there, I'm going to get lots of reflections on all the sides. I could cut this into a whole box, so watch what I do. I'll cut a little way in on each side. Bend this up. The only thing with this plastic is it's hard to glue, so you're going to have to pierce it together. So I'm going to make a whole little light box here. And the light's going to bounce and reflect off of the mirrored surface, giving me, basically intensifying my lights. So it's giving me more light. So if this is only giving me one light, every time it bounces off a mirror, it gives me another light. If I put it inside here, I almost get an infinite amount of lights because it's mirroring off of each other. And it really starts to intensify how many times I'm seeing that light reflect. Kind of like a disco ball. So a disco ball is actually covered in small square mirrors. It has probably 1,000 mirrors on it. And when the light hits those mirrors, one single light reflects off of it 1,000 times, making 1,000 lights on the dance floor. And that's how a disco ball works. So now I have this. I can bend all these sides so they stay up straight. And this is where your sharp pencil is going to come in handy. If I want, and your wire, I can pierce this plastic with my pencil, or if you have a hole puncher, you can hole punch it. Or you could cut it with your scissors. But at some point, you're probably going to want to pierce it. So now I made a nice little box. That light's really reflecting inside there. So that's one way to use the plastic. But if you want to pierce it, hold it over your sketchbook, put it right over a hole, push your pencil through, and now I have a hole. So let me do one there, and I want to attach it right here. So I'm going to, oops, I guess be careful. Try to do it over the hole, otherwise it might do what I just did and split this plastic. I'm going to be a little more careful this time. I need a stopping spot. So I see what I'm doing, I'm pushing down into the hole of my sketchbook. That way my pencil won't keep going. So I'm going to make kind of like a little basket. So I have one here, one here, one here, one here. I'll put one on the top of this one, and the top of this one. And now I can take my wire, poke it through those holes, and hold it together. I don't know what I'm going to do here because that one got broken. I guess I could take some tape or something and hold it together. Or I'll just leave those on the outside and I'll go across to this one. Come on. There we go. So this can cradle it. We can also use this wire to tie it around the LED light to hold it in place and put it right where you want it. So if you want it inside that box and not to move, that's a perfect spot to do that. The other thing you can do with your reflective material is make a tube out of it, or put it inside your tube. So if you make a tube and you put your light in there, that gives it a really interesting look. The only thing is, the only way the light can come out is through here. But once again, if you wanted to, you could fold this up and cut it, cut little things out of it so that the light can come through it as well. But you're only getting one piece of this, so you need to have a plan first. And that's why I'm doing so many different things, to kind of give you some ideas of how you can use this material, because you're not going to get a second chance to mess up once you start cutting away at things, unless you have extra materials at home that you might be able to add to this. Alright, so once I've done this, then I can retube it drop my light in there. So I have light reflecting off the inside, but it's also coming through the sides as well. You can also take this and put it into your paper tube, drop your light in there, and it helps reflect that more. So see how that's bouncing around inside there? And then cover that with tissue paper, and it softens the light. It's not so bright, but it still looks good. Let me see if I put it right in the middle. There we go. So I want you to come up with a plan and figure out what you're going to do. The light sculpture does not have to be hanging, so you don't have to use this wire to hang anything with. Mainly it's to tie things together or to hang this little light inside of your sculpture. And you just wrap your wire around that little knob at the end. If you have this kind of light, I believe I have another kind of light that might have a, some of you might be getting this light, has a little hole in it. You can just put the wire through there. This light turns on by twisting. So once you twist it, it's on. To turn it off, you untwist it. Don't untwist it all the way, otherwise the batteries will fall out. So I'm going to hang this down into my tube. I want it about halfway. I'll just bend these wires over the side. So now it's hanging right there, it won't fall out. So then I can stand this on end without having to worry about it going to the bottom. Once I figured out where I want it to be by just bending the wire, I can figure out how to make this look good here. So I'm going to cut a little slot here and here. So this assignment has a lot of figuring things out and creative problem solving that you're going to have to do on your own. Now, most of you did a lot of that with your last assignment, and I was really pleased with how you handled it. So I really think you can handle this, and I'm not really too worried about anyone not getting this. I think you're going to be fine. Alright, so there's a start to it. Maybe I want to put this over the top. I don't know. You can close these up like this. There's lots of ways you can attack this assignment. Good luck.